have a group of teachers, and I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself with your name, and then Dr. Jordy will be the moderator for us. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that I do have tickets for our historic fashion review.
Oh, good.
So if you'd like to order some of those afterward, just let me know. So with that, Bill, would you like to get started?
Sure. Well, probably all of you know I'm Phil Sunka, and I taught English at the high school. Also taught journalism, and the span was 9 through 12, but most of my years in the high school were teaching 12th grade. And then the last 11 years I had the school within a school classroom over in the district office, and that was like getting a new job but not having to move to a new house in a new town, because it was so different. But it was great because I was helping the kids to be able to graduate. You know, one reason or another, they had not been able to see a clear path to that happening. So I really enjoyed that as well.
I'm Deb Proctor, and I taught high school English for 44 years, 5 years in Leeds, South Dakota. I was hired by my high school principal, and I couldn't believe it because I spent a lot of time in his office. And so I always knew when a kid got a twinkle in the eye, okay, what are you going to do? I knew it. And then I went, transferred to Crawford, Nebraska for 5 years. I taught there, and then in Newcastle for 34.
Well, I'm Betty Petronic, and I started my career in a rural school, and then I went to Rock River, and then I stayed home for many years with my children. Then I moved to Newcastle, and I had many positions in Newcastle. So that's my career.
I'm Dolores Silty, and I moved home in 2013. So I graduated, and then I got married, and I began a career teaching music. And I was fortunate I got to teach in a lot of different places throughout the state. And then I got to move home in, like I said, 2013, and I became a para, which was a great education, probably the one I should have had first, but I did it kind of backwards. So anyway, it's nice to be home again.
I'm Claudia Gatson. I started a kindergarten for my first half year of teaching with 8 students in a small rural school. Then we moved here, and I was here for the next 30 years. And I retired, I taught second and third, and retired teaching computer lab, and don't ask me anything about computers. My 2 oldest sons are experts. I'm blank.
Hi, I'm Janet Hutchinson. I started my teaching career in Moorcroft. I was a kindergarten teacher there for a couple of years, and then I chose to be a stay-at-home mom. But during that time, I was a substitute teacher, a homebound tutor. I taught for Eastern Wyoming College as part of their adjunct faculty, teaching early childhood education classes. And then we moved here to Newcastle, and I still taught for Eastern Wyoming, started substitute teaching, volunteering, tutoring, and then I became part-time kindergarten teacher at Osage at Kitty Moult School. I was there 17 years, and over those 17 years, I taught a large variety of grade levels, multi-classrooms, and the last 4 years I was the only teacher with 13 students teaching everything but music, K through 5. And then I was transferred to town and taught kindergarten here at Newcastle Elementary for 13 years.
I'm Beverly Litteris, and my first job was in Alzada, Montana at a rural school, and I taught grades 5 through 8. And 8th grader was 6'2". And he had, the first week of school, he had his hip replaced because he was gaining weight and stuff. And then I transferred to Belfouche and spent 2 years there, and I was in with 6th grade, 5th and 6th grade math. And at the time, that, what is it, number 9 with the female male? Yes. Well, I was in Belfouche, they didn't have any female people. because we had basketball, so I became a basketball coach and a track coach to be in the locker room with the students. And so I spent 2 years there, and then I worked at a gas station and met John, and I did not want to leave Belle Fourche. I liked Belle Fourche, my home was there, and that's where I was raised. And I told John, 2 years is all I spent there, my sister, anyway, I will talk a lot today. But anyway, I told John that he had to get me a job. I wasn't going to go look for a job. And he had to build me a house and take me on to Hawaii. And he included all that. I live in our house. And I spent 36 years here with 5th grade. I really liked 5th grade. And then I was in title math. And so that's where I ended up.
Well, thank you very much. That's a good introduction. And my name's Mike Jordan, and I have been under the influence of a teacher since I was born.
Lucky you.
Yes. You may know my mother was a business teacher, and I think she graduated from the University of Illinois. I'm thinking it was probably 1949 or 50. And so I was born in 53, so she was a teacher that had a lot of characteristics that you all have now. And whether you came with those characteristics or not, or if you learned them, that's going to be the topic of one of our questions. And so today I was asked to be the moderator, and I developed a list of 12 questions, and then I've added 2 extra credit questions at the end. I think we won't go through all of the participants on the panel with each of the questions, but I'm going to just raise some of the questions, and if you have particular interest in answering them, please just raise your hand rather than speak out, because you know the way classrooms are.
Right.
Yeah.
We remember.
Okay, all right. So the first question that I would like to pose to all of you, I think I would probably like to hear from everybody, because I think that there's a good answer for this. But what was your inspiration to become a teacher? And if it was a family member or a role model, explain the impact that this person or situation may have had. Sarah, would
I'll
you
start.
talk first?
If you don't mind, I realized as they were talking, I didn't include my whole career. And I did teach 2 years at Sky Ranch for Boys, which is where I learned discipline. And then, nothing that I got in Newcastle challenged. So I had a lot of family members who were teachers, and most particularly my great aunt, who was actually like a grandma to me because I didn't have any grandparents. And she was an English and French teacher. And when I got to know her, she had already retired. But she was a big influence on my becoming a teacher. But like I said, lots of others. But I did wear today the pin that she was given by her homeroom class in 1950. It's a watch, working watch, still keeps perfect time 75 years later. She was given this by her homeroom class when she retired, and when she died and people were going through all the things in the home that were hers, this was sent to me. I was in Wyoming by then. And this was sent to me as a memory of her. The other role model that I'd like to mention, when I was 6, we were living in Nashville, and my dad passed away, and my mom decided to move the family to Pennsylvania where she had grown up. And the 2nd grade teacher I had, when we moved up there, saved my life. And you know, I get choked up even thinking about it. But she was a young black woman. I moved from Tennessee, and you know the experience I would have had with racial issues in Tennessee to central Pennsylvania, and she just took me in and understood that this had been such a traumatic experience in my life that it was. I just think I was her personal mission to make sure that I got through the year okay, and so. I wanted to teach 2nd grade that year. Next year I want to teach 3rd grade. Next year I want to teach 4th grade teacher, but eventually became high school.
Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, my story is kind of long because there's no way in God's green earth did I ever want to be a stinking teacher. No way. I wanted to be a clinical psychiatrist. And so Jennifer's dad and I moved to North Dakota. We were right out of high school, and we moved to North Dakota because that was the college that had the best clinical psychiatry program. And so we moved there. I enrolled, came back to our house, and the phone rang. And it was Jerry's dad. And he said, all I saw was this look on his face. And he said, he covered up the phone, he goes, do you want to go to Canada? And I said, why? And he said, I've been drafted. And so his dad heard that, and he said, get in the car and get home. So we came back, and when I got back to Lead, he got on the bus and went to the service. And my mom said, well, Debbie, what are you going to do? And I said, oh, I'll just find a job or something. And the next day, one of my best friends from the Catholic school called me and said, what are you doing today? And I said, I'm going to go look for a job. And she goes, well, I'm going to go register at BH. Why don't you come with me? And I went, okay. And I asked my mom, and she goes, yeah, go. So we went to BH. We went to the registrar. And Sue said, I came to apply. And she said, okay. So she gave Sue a sheet of paper, and she gave me a pen. I said, no, I'm not coming. I'm just here. I'm just here. And Sue goes, oh, fill it out. You never know. You might want to go second semester. Fill it out and have it done. Okay. So I filled it out, and she filled it out, and we turned them in, and she said to Sue, oh, you want to be a kindergarten teacher? And she said, yes, I do. And she said, you didn't, to me, she said, you didn't put anything down. I said, I am not coming here. And Sue goes, oh, put down high school English. She's good at that. And so the registrar wrote it down. And and she told Sue how much she owed, and then she told me how much I owed. And I said, I am not coming here. I don't have the money. I just registered at North Dakota University. And I spent all my money there, and they don't give it back to you once you register, you know, that's done. And Sue said, yes, you do. And I said, are you paying for it? And she said, no, your mom is. So when my mom heard, she called Sue, and they worked together. And so I registered at Black Hills State College. I went through in 3 years, and it was the best thing I ever did in my life.
Because we were students together.
Yes, we were.
We were in the same classes and everything.
Betty, tell us your inspiration.
Thanks for listening.
Well, I'm in sixth grade. I really enjoyed Mrs. McDaniels. And I thought, ooh, I think I want to be a teacher. And
And that was it, huh?
that was it.
Well, that kept it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dolores?
Well, I guess I had a really good family that always supported me, and I had a grandmother, Marvel Howell. And she got me started on piano lessons, and Mom and Dad were always very supportive. And I was blessed with music teachers. Newcastle always had fabulous music teachers. I have to mention Edith Jackson, who was the piano teacher. What an outstanding lady. That takes all of us back. And then she had a daughter or two that were fabulous. And I had Mrs. Mosley as an elementary music teacher. And I had no idea really what she was all about, but she wrote all her own musicals. If the kids were going to perform something, Mrs. Mosley wrote it. I mean, I got a lot of good things out of catalogs. I did not sit down at the keyboard and write, but Mrs. Mosley wrote. And then
She was Edith Jackson's daughter.
that is right.
Oh, cool.
And Betty Thorpe was her sister.
Yeah, she was Betty Thorpe's sister.
So really wonderful music people. And then along 5th grade, I wanted to be in band, and my grandmother saw to it that I have a twin brother. We both had musical instruments because Tim Thompson was our band teacher. And 5th grade, I knew I was going to be involved in music somehow, in teaching. And then I just kept getting really good teachers. Newcastle employed Marcia Patton for a time. Dennis and Lucy Cohn, all of those people were I'm still friends with Dennis and Lucy. And so I just feel blessed that I had this nurturing, you know. So from 3rd grade on, and I had a fantastic grandmother and a mom and dad who always, like I say, supported me. So.
Can I add that you were my aide? when
Somewhere
you were a
in there.
senior in high school. So she wanted to do bulletin boards.
Oh.
And I used some of those for years and years after you made them.
Claudia, what was your inspiration?
Ordering my husband some new blue jeans.
That's
No
got you into
kidding, it
teaching?
was. He had needed new jeans, and I ordered them from the catalog. And at that time, I was one of these people that went to college 6 years after I graduated from high school. I had 3 little kids, and I looked at the price, and I thought, when these kids get in school, I'm going to have to work. And my neighbor lady was going back to get some more on her degree because she was a teacher, and I thought, well, I could do what Lavera did. So I talked to my parents, and they said, sure, at $5.25 an hour, we'll pay your tuition. And they paid my babysitter, who didn't charge very much. And I went back to school. But, you know, when you're young and poor, you have to look at those things.
Sure. Janet, what was your inspiration?
Well, mine is kind of an interesting story. I grew up on a ranch south of Sundance, and I guess I lived a pretty sheltered, protective life. And I went to kindergarten just a little bit, but I had a lot of illness and, you know, at the ranch trying to get to town for half-day kindergarten. So my real first experience in school was 1st grade. And unfortunately, I had a very loud, aggressive teacher that this was during the time that if someone did something wrong, you stick out your hands and you got whacked with a ruler. And I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and I was scared to death. I never got hit, but anytime any other child got hit, I cried right along with them. And I didn't really learn a lot in 1st grade. Fortunately, 2nd grade, I had a really good teacher, took me under her wing. I went along smoothly through elementary until I came to junior high. I had another loud, aggressive teacher, and I just shut down, and I didn't do very well in his class. Made it through high school, decided to become a recreation manager, went to junior college in Sheridan, and I was taking a psychology class and also a biology class. My biology teacher was loud and aggressive. I wasn't doing well. Well, I self-analyzed myself that anytime I was having a loud, aggressive teacher that I was not doing well, and I vowed to myself, I'm going to become a kindergarten teacher and make sure that every child I teach has the greatest opportunity to love school and want to be there. And so that was the turning point in my life, and I strived very hard to do that, to make them feel welcomed and loved.
That's beautiful.
What was your maiden name?
Clark, straight Ernie Lane Clark from Sundance. Charlie Clark here in Newcastle is my uncle.
Thank you.
Did you have my grandma, May Odin?
No, I never
you had her in
did.
fourth
No,
grade?
I didn't get her. I had Mrs. Hudspeth that year.
Okay, I was wanting to hear more stories.
Yeah.
Bev, what was your inspiration?
My father worked for the government in Newell, and we had an experimental station next by. And my dad was, he started with the horse and buggy and all that kind of thing, and whenever an advancement came, he could never get it because he didn't have the paperwork, the education, but he had all the experience. And so that was his goal for his kid. He had 2 daughters, that we got an education. And how I got mine was, my dad owned a farm, like 50 head, and he worked 8 hours for the government. But he would shear sheep. He had 50 sheep, and he would shear sheep. Well, they found out that he was a good shearer, so he would get on these crews in the summer and would shear sheep, and that's how I got through college, by him.
Well, I think think the next question, I'm going to just toss it out, and if somebody feels compelled to answer, just raise your hand or speak it. But was it necessary to have a college degree to become a teacher? And if so, was it necessary that that degree be in education? So let me pose a question. If a person was a physician and wanted to go into teaching, to teach in the school system, could they do that, or did they have to have a degree in education, or did you have to have a degree at all? Because when we look through the Weston County history book, there were students that completed their high school, it seems, and it was usually a woman. They would complete their high school and maybe get a degree or a certification from a college, and they would go out and start teaching when they were 18 years old or something. So tell me about this. Was a college degree necessary to become teacher for all of you?
For all of us.
Yeah.
Our age.
My sister-in-law had 1 year of college. She came to South Dakota, east of Sturgis, with a crew that cut wheat. They talked her into teaching in a small country school. 1 year of college, that's all. She taught 1 year, got pregnant because she got married, and they fired her. Because you could not teach with a baby. Now, you could teach with a 1 year college degree, but you couldn't teach with a baby.
Well, let me just pose another question, and I'll tell you the story. Leo Keenan was a physician in Torrington, and he came in about 1928 or so, or 27 to Torrington, and there was a teacher there, and her first name was Mimi. And so he took a liking to her, and she had to make the decision, if they were going to get married, that she was going to have to stop teaching. And that's what you're talking about, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
ever
the same
hear-
thing's true of nursing back in the 30s, because my mother was an RN. She kept her marriage secret for several weeks because she couldn't be married and nurse. And she didn't have any children then, so.
Yes.
Black
Beth?
Hills for a while, you only need to do, like 2 years or something, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And you could go on and teach, but you were encouraged to go back and get your degree. You didn't have to have your degree, but that was before me.
Yeah, because a lot of us graduated around 75,
Yeah.
70s.
It
So
had
that
to be
would
in the
have been before that.
70s or something, or
Right.
60s.
Now, my mother-in-law was much older, but she only had a certificate from
That's what it was.
Springfield.
You got a
Springfield,
certificate
South Dakota.
from
South Dakota.
Yeah.
And now it's a prison.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a school at that time, and she got a certificate. And she went and worked on the rural schools around, she was from Clone. And so she worked that area of South Dakota in the rural schools until, I don't know, then she'd gotten married. But then in 1950, then she'd gotten married to Ed, and they moved out to Belfouche, and they had a baby, and so then she didn't teach for several years. But I think to go back into teaching, she had to go get her degree
I
back.
understand that.
Mike,
Yes.
well, I graduated in '68, and I came here and taught for a semester. At that time, you could teach high school. You had to have a degree in your subject area, but you didn't have to have an education degree. And for high school, for elementary school, you did. I don't know about junior high, but for I think high school and junior high were one sort of deal. But you didn't have to have education courses. They recommended, of course, but you didn't have to have education courses. You had to do student teaching, but you just had to have a degree in your subject area.
Okay, so my elementary degree at that time, when I graduated in '73, was K-8.
And we had 7-12.
7-12 was our
Yours.
certification.
Yeah, no way I should have taught 7th grade.
I did.
But I was certified. I mean, I was
Right, but my certification was K.
Yeah.
So you get a bachelor's degree in education and then a certification for a certain grade, right? Is that how that works?
At least when we did it.
Yes.
Right.
So now many of you have advanced degrees, and I was wanting to ask the question, what was the importance of that to you besides, you got a little higher salary and that was important.
That was basically it.
Yeah.
No, not
Did you
for me.
Did you become a better teacher by getting
Oh,
an
yeah.
advanced
Oh, yeah.
degree? Yeah.
I got a master's in teaching writing because I love teaching writing and I didn't feel I was as good as I could be at it. So that was my motivation, was to get the education to do a better job of teaching writing. I didn't mind the extra money.
Sure. Betty.
My brother had reading problems. He was dyslexic, and so I wanted that. And so I have a master's. I'm a reading specialist.
Did anybody not take advanced degrees?
I don't have an advanced degree. I have enough hours. I have over 45 hours.
Okay.
But with 5 kids, and as stretched out as mine is, I figured the kids were more important than the
You should have talked to Bob about that long before.
And it would have been interesting to see how many votes may have changed because of Gordon's actions, because of the response of their communities after those bills were passed, specifically the gun-free zone bill. I think that we would have very much seen a change in votes on that one. I think you would have seen more nay votes on that than you had before.
So you're saying that that some folks were counting on the governor veto in that one?
I very much 100% think that especially school districts, courthouses, places like that were banking that the governor was going to go, no way are we letting guns in these areas. And I think that their response afterwards may or may not have swayed some of those representatives and senators to vote a different way because the response was strong.
You should have talked to Bob about that long before.
Well, he's a CPA, so. And Henry went to college 17 years, so.
I meant Robert. I should have said Robert.
Yeah.
Yes, Jen.
Well, I've always liked to consider myself a lifelong learner, and so it just was very important. Anytime an opportunity came up to take classes, I would take them. And then the goal to get my master's was always there. And I think that it's important for our students to see that you keep earning more education. And even as a retired person, I took on a new thing and let Bev be my teacher to learn about quilting.
That was a good job.
She's a good teacher.
Well, and at least in the dark ages, I'm older than all of you, I think, you had, Wyoming required that you get
Yes.
3 or 5 or something more hours every
Every
so
year.
many.
Every 5
Every
years.
5 years.
You have to do some continuing education.
To renew the
And
certificate.
how many hours did you have
I'm
to
going
do?
to say 5.
Five every
There was no such
five
thing
years.
as online either.
So where did you go to get those continuing credits?
The school brought
learning.
some opportunities to us, like you could do staff development, you get half credit or a credit. But I went
Yearly,
to,
yearly.
like
But
UW
they have
and Blackfoot
places
State,
they can
and
go
it was
to
online
computer or
eventually.
they can
So
go
did you
to
do those
seminars.
continuing education in the summer?
I did when I took classes.
Yeah,
But the professional development that they would bring to the school was during the school year.
sure.
And
But the
anybody-
professional development came much later.
Yeah.
Because way back, you had to go back in the summer and pick up classes. Because, well, before I got to Newcastle.
So
I
did
had
any
to
of you
pick one
have
up.
any experience with, say, online continuing education? Physicians and lawyers and all?
Well,
you know,
and there were a few correspondence
Dolores?
courses.
I got my degree, my master's online, and I was one of those people that thought, there's no way I could sit at a computer and it's just not gonna happen. Well, then, you get older and
You can do it.
then and so it was actually probably the best thing I could have done for myself. I found I could stay on task, I could be a self-motivator and keep myself going, and I think I you know, they made it real easy. I finished in 18 months.
So did you get your computer training from Claudia Gutch or Betty Jordan or Chris French or who gave you your computer training? Just be honest. Just be honest.
I was employed at Natrona. I mean, I started working with computers, I remember distinctly, in 1987, because I was printing my choir programs that way, you know, and then by the time I got to Natrona, they were wonderful and they offered classes and gave you a computer if you take this course, and so that got me ready to get my master's online.
Mike, you asked her if she
Yes.
got her computer training from me. No. But when I was in the hospital in Shepherd, nursing home in Shepherd of the Valley, in Casper,
Okay.
her niece was a physical therapist and she was working there. She says, I had you in computer lab. So it might not have been her, it was
Yeah.
her niece.
Well, very good. I want to ask another question. I'm gonna direct it to Betty first, okay? So if you read in your program about Betty's first teaching job, she claims it was 80 miles north of Laramie, and she says it was in a rural school. And probably Don Jordan knows about, was that Garrett, Wyoming? So this was.
Well, it was north of Garrett.
So this is up by Laramie Peak, and it's like 80 miles north of Laramie. And so then she said in her introduction, she that was a rural school, and then she went to a bigger school in Rock River. And I was thinking, now Rock River seems like a pretty rural school to me. So Betty, what's the difference between, what was it, Hay Creek School and Rock River School? What was the difference there?
I had one student in, and I lived in a bunkhouse.
At Hay
the
Creek.
kid,
At Hay Creek.
at Hay Creek.
Yeah.
That was the school, and my teacherage was a bunkhouse, had 2 rooms, the kitchen, and then the student's desk. In fact, I brought that for my show and tell. The student's desk was at the end of my bed.
Oh my.
Yeah, so I had a bookcase at the end of the bed and then his desk.
Oh my gosh, Betty.
Yeah.
And you only had one student.
Okay, so I brought this. This is Laramie down here. My school was that dot out there in the middle of nowhere.
Well, Betty, it says here you were a half-day University of Wyoming Library as a research secretary. You did that at the same time?
Right, so the mornings I would do the library and then I would drive and pick up a student, a kindergarten student, and go into Rock River and teach kindergarten, half-day, because it was half-day kindergarten.
So who else had any experience in a real rural teaching position? Betty?
I was in Zeta, Montana, which is what, I don't know how far it is, north of Belfouche, and they're always there to help you. In rural areas, if I got stuck or if I got anything, they were there to help you. And you didn't have to ask. Usually somebody come in and get the kids, and I would do, well, I like to do some things that, you know, like, all right, the 6th grade, 8th grade kid was going to go into science where they dissect things. So I thought, okay, I'm going to farm animals, I can do this. So they brought in kittens. There is no way I could touch a kitten. No way. There was no way I couldn't. And so then they started butchering, you know, cattle, you know, and we got to at least some of the bigger things, you know, but you go in and in high school, we would do frogs all the time, you know, in college I did frogs, and I thought I'd have frogs or something like that. Not a cat, oh my gosh, no. And that was some of the things that we did. I taught with Miss South Dakota for 2 years, and she was on a cattle ranch, which she was from Belfouche, not on a cattle ranch. And so they were having all kinds of cattle instances, you know, in that, and we cooked our own meals, and we did program that they'd never had because she was music and I was art. So we did, and we walked to the, oh, they had a hall, it was a hall. And we'd come back and we'd have like Friday afternoons, and they would help us with, anything we wanted. They were there to provide and do whatever. And so that was a fun. I had 3 fifth graders, and one of the fifth graders, when I went to Belfouche, his dad made guns. So I was in there shooting, whatever you call those, and I had trap shooting, and I, of course, never done it before. So I had the lowest score. Well, by the end, I had the highest. So we won. We got our trophy and that. But I mean, just different things like that. And they had dances. I didn't think that's where I belonged to, dances, but they had their good dances out there. And I don't know, it's just a different, friendly. It's all friendly.
Let me ask you a question about your marksmanship. Did that have any bearing upon you getting John?
Well, no, it's more my new son-in-law goes to, you don't need to start me with stories.
Well, I figured that you hooked John somewhere.
No, John hooked me.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all
I told him he had to get a job, and he went into Sisson's and got a job for me. And he built the house I'm living in, and we went, on our 25th wedding anniversary, went to Hawaii. He completed all of his desires, and all my desires.
Yeah.
But the shooting, my son-in-law goes pheasant hunting every year, and Robbie makes him bring back feathers to make sure he goes.
So I believe that all of you have had children, is that correct? Now, were there any restrictions in your teaching of your own children in school? Or did you have to move your children over to the other English class or the other math class? Bev?
I didn't have to move them from class, but after school, there was a rule that our children did not stay there.
Before and after.
Before and after. And so it was hard because at 8 o'clock, you're supposed to be there. What am I going to do with the little, And then afterwards, we had sports, so afterwards it wasn't so bad. But she was in elementary. She hid under my desk a lot.
We had to have our kids take off time without pay. We had no maternity leave, and we could not use our sick leave.
Oh, really? So if you had to do something with your children, you just had to...
No, when I had my babies, I could not get paid. I took off the whole month of September when I had Bobby, no pay. And Henry was born in April, and I only took off 3 weeks, so I could close school out. But no pay. Not like you get now.
That's right.
When my granddaughter, I think, took off 2 months on her job with maternity
And she
leave.
got paid properly.
Well, by the time I had children,
They had taken.
but it was just your sick leave, whatever your sick leave was.
Yeah,
There wasn't any child maternity leave, any of that
Yeah,
stuff.
it was, you could use your sick leave then, but no. And like Kathleen Tavici, she had to quit with her first 2, and then didn't get the year's experience. I'm speaking for Fran.
Yes.
I came here, I graduated a semester early from UW and came here to fill in for Betty Updike, who was pregnant at the time. And just to finish out the year for her, because she was out going to have a baby, didn't work. But anyway, I had my brother, I was teaching junior English, and I had my brother in class, and here I was, a brand new teacher, and they didn't have mentors like they do now, and so I was plopped down in this classroom with my brother and all his friends. And my brother wasn't as much problem as all his friends was saying. It was Danny Decker and some of those. I was there. And Dan McCollum, and we were, every week, I think, either Bruce or I were in the guidance counselor's office, but there was no, the classes had already been made up, of course, but there was no blinking about me having my brother in class for my first year of teaching.
Yes, Deb.
I was going to say that when I taught my daughter Jennifer, she raised her hand and she said, "What do I call you?" And I said, call me Mom.
Yeah, because all the kids knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Miranda Brown said to me, if she gets to call you Mom, we all get to.
And that's how you became Mom.
Ma Proctor. And then,
I didn't know that story.
and then Johnny Walker, when I had him, he raised his hand one day and he said, Mom, may I say something to you? And I'm thinking, oh no. And I said, go ahead. And he said, you're not a Ma Proctor. You're a big mama. And I said, does that mean I'm fat? And he goes, no, it means you're strong and tough. And then when I got my grandkids, I was grandma.
Has that tradition kind of continued? It seems to me that I hear the announcers at the basketball games calling for Ma Proctor.
That's right.
Is that correct?
And that's why they call me that.
Oh,
Because that it continued for many years
Oh, yeah.
until, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, but I didn't know the origination of it.
Oh, yeah. When I talked to
Well, Janet, I need to ask you a question. This is kind of the next question. You came out beginning your teaching career, and what year did you begin teaching?
In 77.
In 77. So tell us about your first year of teaching. How did you know what to teach? Or was it were you just winging it, or what was the deal?
No, there were guidelines then that we had, but teaching kindergarten, it was in Moorcroft during the boom. I had half-day kindergarten with 26 kindergartners in each class. And it was very busy, but the children were very well behaved. Our goals for kindergarten were to learn the basic 8 colors, to count to 10, and know their ABCs. You know, so it was very low requirements. My budget was $8 a student.
So tell me about, were these Wyoming school standards?
No, I think
who
they were
developed
just
those?
locally made then.
They were locally made. So
Yep.
when did state school standards come about?
When was that?
What was that? After Larry became
Well, they've been
government.
named so many things. We did
Right.
objectives and then we did something
Yeah, but
else.
was
and-
it
Performance standards.
Right,
when the
those
state
are the same thing,
handled
they're just
it.
named different.
So what did you do when you first started teaching? Your first year?
Yeah,
You had a book.
You followed, yeah.
Okay. So the school district provided you
Provide you
A teacher's manual.
a teacher's
teacher's
manual.
manual and they usually have books to go with it, yeah.
I see. Dolores, you were in music. When you started teaching, did the school district give you a workbook and said, this is what we want you to teach, or how did you know
There
what
was
to teach?
a curriculum that was written by previous music teachers, but Betty and I were talking. There was a movement, I want to say, was it with President Bush or something?
No Child Left Behind.
Behind,
Is that what you're talking
right,
about?
when the government took
That's
over
when it
the
started.
education
Right,
department.
right.
Thank you.
And it varies, you know, depends on the school, the teacher, what you're teaching. You know, I had teacher's manuals in some things, but not in others, so then you just come up with it yourself.
Well, Barbara was talking about her first year of teaching, and I don't know if I heard her say this correctly, or not, or if I heard her accurately. But I wanted to pose a question to all of you. Who helped you during your first year of teaching? Were there other teachers that helped you, or were there administrative people, or did some parents come in and say, Daddy, I'm going to give you a little advice or something like that? So who helped you learn to become a teacher during that first year? Betty? Oh, yes.
Well, my teaching there, I was given the curriculum, and this is what you had, you know, what the first grader had to have accomplished by the end of the year. And so that's what I followed, but I didn't have any help out.
Did anybody evaluate your performance
Oh,
at the
yeah.
end of the year? How did they do that?
Well, the guy came out from Laramie, my superintendent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deb, you raised your hand about your first year. Who helped you?
Brad McCoy. He was a student of mine. And I'll tell you what, he was a little poo-bit. He taught me, and I love to tell the story, and he knows I tell it. He came up to me and he said, may I go to the library? And I'm thinking, Bradley Wayne, because we called him Bradley Wayne. Bradley Wayne wants to go to the library? Oh, sure, go ahead and go, Brad. So he went, and about 20 minutes later, here came the principal with Bradley Wayne in his hand. And he said, is this one yours? And I went, yes, and shoved him in there like that, and he said, take care of him. And I said, Bradley Wayne, what did you do? And he said, well, I was looking for a book, and our librarian was a hippie. She never shaved her armpits, she never shaved her legs, she never shaved anything. And so when she was reaching for a book, he said, my face was in her armpit. And I said, so? And he said, you know what I did? What? He said, I yanked your hair.
Oh, no.
And she said, and then he said, she went to the phone, called the principal.
Sure.
Then he came up and got him and brought him to me. So he taught me what to do.
Jackie?
Well, I just feel I was very fortunate that I had a wonderful experience when I student taught. And Harleen Hill, she's Lois Thorson's sister, was my mentor teacher. And she created for me a packet for every month of everything we did in kindergarten, art projects, handwriting, you know, everything. And so she really set me up to have a great year. Back then you really didn't have mentors. You were just kind
That
of
started later. Yeah.
there and did what you thought was the best.
The teacher I replaced left good files of like quizzes and things like that. So I could use that to start the first year and then branch out. But the one that helped me the most was my sister. She's 7 years older, English teacher. She was in central Pennsylvania. We ran up a phone bill back then. Any question I had, I just called Ruth.
Claudia, who helped you that first year?
I started at kindergarten and I was in Oklahoma because I graduated at semester. The parents wanted their kids to go to kindergarten because the next year 2 or 3 country schools were going to have to combine. Schools were getting too small. And their kids would not have kindergarten. So I had 8 pupils. The lady that was first and second grade teacher, I used some of her stuff. I don't know what I did. I did it on my own because there was no guidelines. The principal and superintendent didn't know what to do. All he knew were these parents demanded a kindergarten so their kids wouldn't be so far behind the kids from the other schools. And we got by, and some of them were reading by the time we got through that semester. But it was, I had a little girl that had epilepsy, and she had a seizure in class. I got one of the other teachers to come and watch the kids while I took her home. And it was an experience, but they thought I would stay there, but instead I came here.
Let me ask another question. All of you taught, obviously. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. But what were your other duties? I mean, did you have extracurricular expectations did the administration or did someone else say, I want you to become the coach, or I want you to become the sponsor for this or that? So tell me about some of that. Bev, you talked a little bit about becoming a coach for basketball and volleyball?
Oh, yeah. No education at all. I was just to be in the girls' bathroom when they took showers.
What year was that?
Title IX. It was in 77.
Okay.
No, it was 74, 75 in there.
And what school were you in?
I was in Belfouche.
Belfouche.
Yeah. And I was in middle school. No, I did high school because the coach and I taught middle school, or 4 or 5, 6 and 7, 5, 6 and 7 were together. So we could make our plans, and then we'd go to the high school after school and do our coaching. And of course, I learned a lot from coaching, and I'd go every trip. I got scared one time because this gal, she kind of fainted and she had contacts and I couldn't get them out. And so I finally went on the floor to get him, but he was always the head. I didn't have any experience. And Black Hills Conference was not real big. And when I came to Newcastle, I took on cheerleaders, thinking wasn't very big. Oh my gosh, the cheerleaders, and I took all 4 sports for $10,000. I got $10,000 to pay raise, and of course, we were always better than South Dakota, Wyoming was. Anyway, we got to go to, wherever, it wasn't Spearfish. Probably the furthest place I went was Custer, and that was the shortest place we went.
Yeah.
And so John would drive that little bus, and we'd all get on that bus. And so the cheerleaders didn't always go with the team. We had our own little bus to go on.
I'd forgotten that you did that, because when I got hired in '77, I had to agree to take the cheerleaders to get the job.
Yes, yeah, they
And
like to put that in
They
there.
did, yeah, and I had nothing to do, I didn't know nothing about cheerleaders, but I had to drive in a rear-wheel drive car to
Oh.
take the girls to the different things if we didn't go on the bus, and we rarely did go on the bus. But that's how I got to know Ronnie Nelson. Because he would put the car of cheerleaders with me driving, they'd all go to sleep, of course, on the way home.
Oh, yeah.
And it was always snowing every Monday. But Ronnie would put me in front of the athlete bus, so then if I had a problem, he'd be right there.
No, we were pretty, John always drove. because
Yeah, that's
he had
wonderful.
he had his CDL or whatever.
And what did you do for extracurricular?
Warcraft, I was assistant volleyball coach, and then
And
when
what
I
year was
went
that then?
back in 77, way back
Okay.
when, yep. And then at Osage, when I first went to work there, we had 78 students. We had basketball team, track team, and I was the cheerleading sponsor.
All the cheerleaders, they like to put that in there.
I wanted that, you asked this question earlier, I wanted to coach volleyball when my daughter was in junior high, and I was told they wouldn't allow me to do that. So I became a little unhappy and removed all my coaching endorsements, so I wouldn't be forced to coach something I didn't want to coach.
Sure. Claudia, how about you? What extracurricular functions did you do?
Playground duty and 0 degrees weather on the west side of Gertrude in dresses 3 times a day, once a week. That was enough.
I see.
Did you have to wear dresses?
Well, yes, we had to wear dresses.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were still wearing dresses.
No, we could wear pants. We could wear pants.
Oh, it was later.
It was
Yeah,
later.
I could always wear pants.
Oh, no, we wore dresses. I wore a lot of wonderalls.
Dolores, what about your extracurricular activities?
I started in Pinedale, and I remember I had recess duty every Wednesday, and every Wednesday the wind
It
blowed.
Enthusiasm.
Yeah. And I was a cheerleading sponsor.
Oh, good. Every one of us.
And then I had extra choirs. I had extra junior high choir and a high school jazz choir and things like that. And then by the time I got to Casper, we were doing drama productions, so I was musical director for.
So those were activities outside of the
Yeah,
school
outside of
expectations.
normal day.
Yeah. Betty, how about you?
Oh, my. In elementary, well, in Rock River, so it would have been recess duty and lunch duty. And then I also coached basketball, girls basketball and volleyball. And for those, they had an old, if you remember seeing those tour buses for Yellowstone in the 50s? I had one of those to take my teams to the schools, and I had to drive it, so I had to have a CD.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I had to have a bus, well,
Something.
it's not the full CD, for just a small bus. So I had to have that.
I'm told that the weather in Rock River was a lot better than it was in Newcastle. Is that correct? I mean, you didn't have bad roads then?
Oh, no.
And,
Never.
okay.
No. And I got to go to wonderful places like Arlington and Chugwater.
Sure.
And those places where they never get any wind.
Yeah. And so what year were you in Rock River?
73, well, no, Rock River would have been 74 through 76.
Okay.
In addition to the weekly printed version of the newsletter journal, we also promote our community and share important information on our award-winning website, newslj.com, and in our weekly email newsletter, Nuke Now. We also connect with readers through various social media platforms and invite you to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can even take a look at a recent meeting of the City Council, School Board, or County Commission on our YouTube channel. We do hope that you will go to newslj.com and subscribe today, and we look forward to making all of our great content available to you. But regardless of your level of support, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing your part to preserve a free and independent local press.
Rock River would have been 74 through 76.
Okay, all right. Did you do any other extracurricular activities as you went on teaching?
Then I moved to Newcastle, and I had, since I was in the high school, you had to take a class sponsor. You had to have that, and I did volleyball and track.
Oh, yeah,
Middle
track.
school track.
Lots of track.
High school volleyball freshman I had, and then middle school track.
So you were a swimming instructor in Newcastle here.
But
did you teach life saving?
Well, that was within the swimming program at that time, which had been for years and years, was a full day swimming program, and the kids had swimming a full quarter.
Yeah.
2 days a week. 3 days.
How about your extracurricular activities?
Well, in lead, I was the cheerleading coach, and my brother taught with me in lead also. And he said, "Debbie, you're such a good cheerleading coach. Why don't you start up like a pom-pom group?" And I said, "Okay." So I went and talked to Mr. Osmond, and he said, "Yeah, you could do that." And so we had tryouts and everything, and of course my brother was on the tryout selection committee. And I said, "Nick, what am I going to call this group of girls?" And he said, "Digger Debs."
For the diggers, yeah.
And then in Crawford, I coached volleyball. Crawford is a small school, if any of you are familiar with the town. I coached volleyball. I did the pom-pom group. I did the cheerleaders. I did the yearbook. I did, in a small school like that, you do everything. And it was fun. And so when I moved to Newcastle then, and I was up in my room working, and Gary Anderson came up to me and he said, "Deb, I really looked over what you did," and he said, "Would you be interested in taking the yearbook sometime?" Because who did it then?
Was it Alex Middich?
No, it was a man.
It wasn't Skip Olson.
No. But
Gene Ward. It was Gene Ward.
It was Gene Ward. And he said, and Gene was getting older, and he said, "Would you ever take over the yearbook?" And I said, "Sure, whenever you need me." And so when Gene Ward retired, then I took on the yearbook at Newcastle High School.
But you had a class for it.
I had a class.
That makes a big difference.
And-
And I had for journalism as well. We didn't have to do it all.
Yes, and we
extracurricular.
got to pick our own kids. I mean, they didn't just get to take a registration form and sign and come in there, because the first year in Newcastle that happened, and I thought, kids are taking this class because they think it's going to be easy.
Sure.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. So anyway, yeah.
Phil, what about your extracurricular activities?
Well, I did work hard to get rid of cheerleaders. First year, I had all the seasons, and then the next year, I talked them into having a different cheerleading sponsor per season. So I did basketball, and Ruth Wentling did football, and that kind of thing. But the main thing over the years was journalism. But like I said, I had a class for journalism. And so there was a lot of time out of the school day for getting things done, and kids coming in on a Saturday, and that kind of thing, and the production of the paper. But it wasn't like a sport where all you have is your out of school time.
Sure. Well, I know you all had students. Deb, go ahead.
I don't know if this is where you want to do this, but anyway, I had quite a few extracurricular activities that I did. For instance, Mellow, I was on the planning team. I love this. I got this prepared. I always hated when instructors brought their easels out and they were big and thick like this. But I wanted to show you some of the things. Pencil store, I started the pencil store.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
This young man, I'm blank right now. Well, right here, Jones. Ryan. I recommended him with We the People. We keep getting information, and the things that I wanted to do was make my classes. If we went to write a letter, and it needed to be a letter that you mailed. It wasn't just in class, and so a lot of these are that. And for him, he was my pencil store each year for I don't know how many years. I would have a manager, and we'd have a manager and clerks and people that would brought in, and the managers had to go get a loan from the pencil bank. I mean, I made it as close to reality as I could. Anyhow, he was very special because he did very well. I didn't have to do anything. He took it all. He was in there after school, and this was all after school, before after school. And what was nice, I had my customers were there. The kids couldn't wait to have pencils, and I felt sorry for these parents because they always had pencils with funny tops on it. But anyway, and I recommended him for a trip while he was in 5th grade. They decided not to go, his family. So it was We the People, and so in middle school, they got a grant for him to go, and the family went to there. And one of his goals as a 5th grader was to be governor of Wyoming. Anyway, I'll go through quickly these. We wrote a letter to get a deed we have 1 acre. Our class had an acre on a centennial acre. And then this is when we did the centennial, and we bought money, and we put pennies in banks to, I can't remember what we paid them for. I didn't look through all this. This is one of my biggest projects, was the greenhouse. It's still there at the end of the elementary. It was one of those days that you have Betty Sample walk in the door and says, there's an innovative grant I want you to try and go for. And that's when the superintendent was supportive. He was very supportive, and we did well. And there's so many stories with this. But anyhow, Jackie, she made a inside of our greenhouse to do that. And then this is another activity I did. We all had a box, and it was Polar Express, and so each class had a box, and they filled it with how many they read, and then at the end of it, we all got to go to the theater to go to Pony Express. Another thing I got involved was we also read, so I wanted authors, real authors. So Kathy Dummer and I brought in some real authors, and it was surprising how many we have. This is John Erickson. He's the one that was from Texas, and Hank the Cowdog books. And it was disappointing to see when we moved from the old school to the new one, he donated books. These authors donated their books to every grade level, and he had 12 of them. And he donated, and those books went to the dump. And then also we have to include, with the greenhouse, we included every class. This one is, we did the sex program in the middle school is when they have those bags of dirt. That's where we got our potting soil, because they dressed their babies up, which was to carry these around for a week, and the first track meet they'd come down and deliver my potting soil. In the high school we had that, there's an N at the top of the football field that's made out of railroad ties. They painted it black. I spent 2 years trying to get orange marigolds in there, not knowing it's in an alkali bed. Alkali doesn't go with the soil yet. And I have to mention, there's a young man in that day and age that knew his soil when we had the greenhouse.
Kelly Groggs.
Oh, no, another one.
Another one, okay,
Yeah.
because Kelly was really good.
No, well, he still knows how to grow the right soil for his weed.
Oh,
And this one.
You
He's
want to
still.
cut that out of the tape?
I don't do
She
that.
said wheat, wheat.
Yeah. This is a picture of our store, and we had it. Any money that we got went back into the store, or I bought popcorn, something for the kids. That's what we always wanted to do. And I was district teacher of the year, some year, I don't know. One time we had, the kids, high tea, heard about high tea all the time. And so we all got dressed up. And these are the men. And they had to serve us tea. And we had more fun that day. It was just a day, but we had to get ready, and we had to, I made the tea and so on, but they had to get dressed up and wear their hats and so on. But that Underground Railroad was something that was in our history books. And we made a quilt, Underground Railroad, and Ryan has that. And what, I have to read this to you. Yes, this is what Mrs. Woods sent with this quilt. Math quilt grant, we got a grant. The shoe fly, which is this design, represents Mrs. Wood, who has helped you escape from the elementary school. Her responsibility was to secretly aid and harbor students, and sometimes the students hid out in books and classrooms. The library was frequently used as a reading place. You have secretly waited for the signal from across town, and now you're ready for your new adventure in 6th grade. She wrote that. And I got to do the yearbook for about 3 years. Nancy and I did the yearbook. And this book was made by one of my students' mothers, and here's Ryan. He came to my retirement party. And this book is made of my retirement, if you want to look at it. There's, every teacher ought to have the retirement party I had. My family helped me.
Well, one of the things that develops out of an oral history program like this is to have a recording. And Cindy Dicer at the museum will have this oral history available. If some people want to watch it. Walter, it goes on YouTube, so it's publicly available to see. Is that correct?
On the Newsletter Journals channel.
Under the Newsletter Journal, yeah. So we are just a little past 1 hour, and I just want to ask a couple of other questions. I want to state one thing for sure. Bev was talking about some of her accomplishments and her awards, and I've included in the booklet there 2 references to awards that the State Historical Society gave to teachers. And one was to Phil as the Wyoming Teacher of the Year, and one was to Kitty Moats, and I think Janet was probably responsible for that or participated in it. It sounded like it anyway.
Okay.
But Kitty Moats had received an award for an outstanding history project in 2001 also. And so, so I have the last 2 questions that I want to ask, just in general. Was there anything special about teaching in Wyoming? So what was you all obviously taught in Wyoming, and none of you got up and left. And so what was so special about teaching in Wyoming? Deb?
When my first day of teaching at Newcastle High School, I was standing outside my door, which I always did, and students would walk down the hallway and they would say, "Are you the new English teacher?" And I would say, "Yes," and they go, "Oh, Newcastle High School students hug." They are huggers. I mean, they were huggers every year. And that the first time I had students hug me, because in South Dakota and Nebraska, you didn't hug students. But in Newcastle High School,
sure,
you did. And every time I think about it, it just gives me goosebumps because they were so kind and soft-hearted, and I loved them all.
Claudia, what was the difference teaching in Wyoming versus Oklahoma?
Well, I only taught kindergarten there, and I started it myself. But I think that Wyoming schools at that time were a little better than Oklahoma schools.
Okay.
My children, they pay, yeah, at that time Oklahoma was under whatever they called it because their pay was so bad. Nobody wanted to stay there. But I think the children were probably more well educated. That doesn't mean, now, growing up, I lived in a big city, not a big city, I lived in a city about the size of Rapid, it was Rapid at that time, and had a very good education, but I think in the smaller towns, the education wasn't so good.
But a better deal in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mean pay?
Yeah, pay, but also
Oh,
the
yeah,
professional
pay
experience.
really
That's
advanced
why I
there
think
for a while.
Yeah.
And class size, that's another thing. We
Right.
have classes of 25 or 30 kids.
Sure.
But I also have to give credit to the Newcastle community because it was a great place to raise a family. And that wasn't just the school system.
Well, class size was usually small, but the year Henry started kindergarten, we had 6 kindergartens with at least 25 kids.
Really?
Wow. It was the oil boom. It was
Yeah.
really.
Well, I was just gonna share, at Kitty Modes, when I had the multiple K through 5, we rotated curriculums. So one year it was 3rd grade social studies, next year was 4th grade and 5th grade. And I had 2 years that I had the opportunity to teach Wyoming history. And that was really special. Yeah, that was great.
Very good. Well, now, there's something obvious about our panel here today, ladies. What's obvious? Now, where are the men? Men were teachers.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I couldn't think of any that were
Still alive.
so how did you deal with men teachers? Did you get along with men teachers?
Well, there was Paul Patterson.
I have my degree.
Fifth grade, there was always
Same
two men.
as Betty.
Now, what's that?
In fifth grade, there was always 2 men and 2 women.
Oh, so it was set up in 5th grade to have 2 men and 2
And
women.
then in 6th grade was pretty much that way too.
Oh, okay.
With,
I went to grade
just,
school.
they got older.
Well, I did
Because
work
the
with
kids were older.
Paul Patterson, and he's carrying groceries out of there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Something else I'd like to thank the administration
One
because
teacher.
if we had a desire to go to a conference or something,
That was
they
in
would help us.
30.
They would give us money.
They were very good.
And they were always very, very supportive. My support was mostly principals and the greenhouse was, I think his name was Partridge.
Yeah, I thought Ray Partridge was in that picture.
Right, and he was into them. We need to see some years
So
there.
the last question I wanted to ask is, if you had the opportunity to choose to go into teaching or to go into political science or dissecting frogs, would you still choose the profession that you chose?
I'm sure that I would. I mean, I had no reason not to. Today's a different world than, when we were teaching, so there's that. But I've got to say, while I got the floor,
Yeah.
I didn't bring a scrapbook. But can anybody guess what this is? So you can't say.
It's a book your students read.
Yeah, well, which one would it be?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, thank you. This is my copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, which I would never give away. It'll
Great
probably
book.
be buried with me. But it's got, all the little places that I had notes and all the little, so this is my little
Show and tell.
show and tell thing.
Very good. Deb, would you go back to teaching or would you go into psychology?
No, but I was a teacher. I loved my job.
Yeah.
And even like in Lee, it was awesome teaching there, even with rapid rain. And then in Crawford, Nebraska, it was small, and I taught 7 to 12 there in that school, and that was decent. And then here,
Sure.
it just,
You'd come back to it.
I would definitely.
Betty, what about you?
Well, I had such a varied career, as you can tell. And boy, I didn't. I probably would.
Yeah.
Knowing a lot of the politics now,
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Yeah, the teaching has changed a bit.
oh, it has.
Dolores, what about you? Would you go teaching or would you become like a math teacher instead of a musical teacher?
I love music. I love teaching music, and I love to get to that performance with my kids, but you know, you have some other things you're dealing with. I mean, music was a part of it, but there's so many kids that have so many needs. And I feel for those kids, and I think the schools are in a tough spot right now because there's so many things you have to have for those students to succeed, and they deserve the opportunity to succeed. But I just think you really have to think about it and know if you want to delve into all of that. I mean, I had some fantastic kids, and I had some kids that would break your heart.
Sure.
It's tough.
So would it be fair to say that the teachers are servants?
Well, you take on a lot. You love your kids. You want the best for them, and it's just really hard when you see kids that don't have the support.
Sure.
At
And you
home.
become more of that now than then.
Yeah, and so you just gotta go in with your eyes wide open.
Claudia, if you hadn't had a need for, or an extra
need
income
for
at that
money.
time, would you have gone into teaching, or what do you think these days? Would you go into teaching?
I really don't know. I'm the oldest one here, so that's been a long time. I've been retired for 30 years, but I don't know. It would depend. I really found out when I was substituting after I retired that I really liked kindergarten. So, you know, but I think of the times that I sat with these children in my class that now wouldn't have been in your class very much, but they were special ed children. And I think that was a real challenge because they didn't have it when I started. We're not 10 or 15 years after I started. And at least these children get the help they need
Sure.
and can succeed. Where I wonder, you know, what happened to it?
Sure. Janet, what about you? Would you go into teaching after this experience that you've had for 40 plus years?
I would. I loved being a teacher and having those children love me and be ready to learn because they loved me, you know, and so that would want them to do good work for me, and so it was very fulfilling. My heart is full.
Very good. What about you, Bev?
Well, I guess I would. I feel like I've continued.
Right.
Instead of little, they're big. And believe it or not, they have the same problem.
Ask Janet.
Yeah. No, I have ones that come in and just want to talk. I have people that come in. My quote is, you never know what's going to walk through the door.
Sure.
And I've had several experiences of walking through the door and just, I can just go on. I had one, okay, I'll make it short. I had one guy that would not get off the front carpet. You know, I have a doorway, he would stay right there until I recognized him. Then he would come and talk to me. And he works for Baldwin's, and he works on the fence, and so he would come in, long hair, jacket torn, and Robbie looked at him and she says, "You want us to fix your jacket?" He says, "No, it'll look like that tomorrow after I get done with barbed wire." And what he wanted was a quilt for his children with pictures on it. And all the pictures he had to get them, and this was like a year we worked on it. And he would come through, he comes through once a year. He stops here and he goes, anyway, goes around, and I thought, oh my gosh, he doesn't have the money to do this because those are expensive to get these pictures on. And so I ran out to see, he says, "You're the only quilt shop that would talk to me." And I said, "Well, that's all I do, you know, whatever." So he gave me cash, and I went out the door to see what kind of pickup. He had the best of the best. He could afford it. And the next time he came through, he wrote me a check, and I kind of went, and he used it in his cup, and it had coffee stains. It was pushed in that cup. I mean, it was, and he filled it out, and I went,
Yeah.
It was good, and he was very happy. But it was one of those things that, you know, I made a difference in his life.
Absolutely. Well, I want to just say a couple of things. I'm going to put in a plug for, go ahead, Jen.
The thing I brought along to share, my first year teaching, we would have 2 days of in-service. One, there would be a speaker, and one, you were allowed to work in your classroom. And the speaker said, here's what you need to do. You need to start a heartwarming file. So this is my heartwarming file that you put in positive notes from the kids and the parents. And then when you have a tough day at school, you go to your file and you pull one out and read it. And then, it touches your heart again. And this one is one of my favorite, Elaine Folk.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the
Postmistress. Her son, Lucas, wrote this to me in kindergarten. I love my school, I love my family, I love my parents, and I love my Mrs. Hutchinson. One of the things I did every year was give the students a picture of me, and she said he still has that on his wall.
Oh, how nice.
Outstanding. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate everybody on the panel and the audience. I want to open I just want the audience to ask 2 or 3 questions if they would like. But before they do, I want to make a plug for a program for 2 weeks from now. It'll be at 1 p.m. at the meeting hall at the Lutheran Church. And we're going to put a focus on the Newcastle High School choir department, 1963 and 64. They produced record albums, and these albums are extraordinary. And I want you to come and participate in that program. We'll listen to some of the music. We'll talk about some of the participants that were in the choir. And the other plug that I wanted to make, if you have records from your teaching, if you want to talk with Cindy Dicer, she may have a place to take care of those as an archive for teachers of Newcastle or Weston County. So I want you to keep that in mind, and if you have a need to talk to her, please do that. So, are there any questions? Yes, Cindy.
First of all, another plug. So May 5th, Dean Butler is going to do a presentation on growing up cowboy, and that's going to be at the Senior Center. So just while we're doing
May 5th, at what time?
At 1:30.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions then for our panel? Lucille.
About our program on the 16th of May. You announced that?
Yes. So on May 16th at 1 p.m., and I think that is a Thursday, is it? Thursday. The Weston County Historic Preservation Board is presenting a preservation award for the Episcopal Church. Mike and Janet Hutchinson are leaders in the church, and the Weston County Historic Preservation Board is recognizing the church on that day at 1 p.m. And we'll talk about the history of the Episcopal Church. And Mike Hutchinson, I believe, is going to give a program on the windows, the historic stained glass windows of the church.
It is the oldest church in Wyoming.
Yes. So I want you to make sure that's May 16th. May 16th at 1 p.m. At the Episcopal Church.
Oh, and Mike's bringing cookies. What'd you say? Well,
Maybe not. So, Lucille.
I have one other thing that I'd like to say. I just appreciated you all so much. You were wonderful. But I'd like to just say one thing, since I was married to a lawyer for a long time. The Constitution of Wyoming specifically mentions education as one of the most important things in the state. And my experience of living here for a long time is that that is true, that the state does cherish education. And I think that the university is a land grant college and is supported by the mineral industry of the state, and all of this education is part of what we are in Wyoming. That's what I believe.
Well, and saying that, because Wyoming is a mineral state, we have more money.
Right.
And they do put it in quite a bit of education. And so that's why we're better than some other states around us, because we have materials and so forth.
And more money.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Glenn?
How did you discipline your kids if they were bad in school? Did you spank them? Did you take a yardstick to them, or did you make them stand in the corner, or what?
I
one of my students would say, she'd just sit down and say, we need to have a little talk. And you develop a reputation as a teacher. I've looked around, I taught most of the kids of all the people in here, you know, and so I know that you heard them talk about your various teachers. But you develop a reputation, and when I sat down with a kid and said, we need to have a talk, they knew they better listen, because if we couldn't work it out, then they'd be out. But you don't want to send them out immediately. You want to try to work it out with the student yourself first.
And these two are extreme
disciplinarians. And all I had to, you know, because I was such a little creep in school, I knew the twinkle in the eye.
Yeah, you could.
And I could see it, and I would say, don't do it. And a lot of times, you know, that's all I would have to say, or I would just look at them, and they say Mrs. Proctor would give you the look, and you knew that was it.
Betty, when you made that comment, that was a compliment too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, okay.
I took it that way.
I took it as a compliment, yeah. Oh.
Dolores, why did you do the disciplined music students?
Oh, it's a one-on-one conversation. Yeah, it takes time out of the class.
Sure. But the students were in your class because they wanted to be necessarily, correct? Or was it just a place to hide away?
You know, when you're teaching K through 5, everybody's in music basically.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a choice. I had a captive audience. And then junior high in Casper, it's hard. I mean, when there were budget cuts and you'd lose a teacher or a class of a certain kind, then you had more students in your music and vocal and music exploration classes, because those other classes weren't available anymore. So I would get some kids that it was a total surprise to them that they were coming in my door.
I want to tell you a story that's going to be told in 2 weeks. Larry Farrell was the conductor of the choral department, and there was a man in Newcastle by the name of Kirk Rolls, I think. And Kirk could not sing. But at the time, the place to be was in the choir.
Yeah.
So Larry Farrell permitted him to be in the choir, but asked him not to sing. And he agreed, because I mean, it was the place to be. You didn't ask anybody not to sing, did you?
No, I didn't, but I learned that placement is a key.
I will tell you a story. When Dolores was junior and senior, it was this thing, if you were a boy, to be in choir. You had to be in choir as well as you had to play football and basketball. That was, and our choir was huge.
We had, I'm not exaggerating, we had at least 80 kids in choir and at least 80 kids in band.
It was just the thing to do.
Yeah.
Oh, and absolutely. You learn everything.
Yeah.
Any other discipline stories?
Mine was a finger shaking, and we had to have both sides of the story. Because usually the one that you caught was not the one that, you know, was not, and so it was instigated. And this is what I use all the time now on the kid.
Are you pointing that at me, Ben?
Whatever. Straighten up.
Any other questions for our panel? Well, there are some refreshments over here. Thank you very much for coming. I think it was a great opportunity today. Thank you very much.